13th century Dominican friar Meister Eckhart was known for saying, "Be willing to be a beginner every single moment." When you think about being a beginner, what feelings come to mind? Excitement, curiosity, hopefulness, joy, or perhaps fear, self doubt, frustration, or overwhelm? Starting something new can be messy and a little disorienting, but as the accomplished actor Helen Hayes said, the expert at anything was once a beginner. Being a successful beginner relies on three big ideas. You are rooted in humility. You say, "I don't know everything." You are open to conversion and just admitting, "I can be transformed." And you are anchored in trust. And you understand that God is guiding me. Welcome back to the podcast, my friends. This year, about 2.5 million students are enrolled in college for the first time. That's a lot of beginners. This episode of Catholics on Campus is being released around the start of the new liturgical year. It's a time of new beginnings. And just realize you are not alone. To help me explore some of the themes about new beginnings, I have invited a special guest who has experienced new beginnings of his own. Father Chris Holcomb was ordained a priest just a few months ago in May 2025, and now serves at the Co-Cathedral of St. Thomas More in Tallahassee, Florida. I met Father Chris in June when we were both at the Vatican for the Jubilee Year of Hope. We happened to get into a conversation and we were talking about being from Florida, and the conversation went on and we realized that we had my pastor, Father George Nursey, in common. Father Nursey was a faculty member for Chris when he was in seminary. So I have no doubt that the Lord was doing that introduction that day. So welcome, Father Chris. I'm really glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad that you're here. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you became to be the chaplain at Florida State University's Catholic Student Union?
Yes, so I am from Pensacola, Florida, but I was born in Mobile, Alabama, and I have been Catholic my entire life, a cradle Catholic, but I've just now been ordained at age 40, so kind of a long, circuitous route to get there. I went to Catholic schools growing up. That was very important to me. A lot of sacrifices from my parents to make that happen. And went to a small Jesuit school in Mobile called Spring Hill College, had a great time there. My heart was always kind of split about what I wanted to do when I grew up, so to speak. And I kind of graduated without a firm plan, but I at that point wanted to be a filmmaker and make movies, be the next George Lucas or Steven Spielberg. Obviously, that's not how life went. And I worked for a year as a youth minister after college because I'd been very involved in campus ministry. And then I finally got to kind of live out my dream at that point, which was to go to film school. And ironically, or interestingly enough, I was here at Florida State University and their film program for my master's degree and wrapped that up about 15 years ago. But throughout that entire time, despite the friendships I was making, despite the hard work, despite really kind of being good at what I was doing, my heart wasn't all in it. And I'd already gotten a taste of full-time ministry and everything. So I graduated. A lot of things happened in that year. My sister had her first child a couple years after I graduated. I had the opportunity to work on a film out west. I had opportunities to teach. And I realized I have all these student loans. And in the back of my mind, while all this was happening, was the possibility of the seminary. In the meantime, my grandfather passed away. I was substitute teaching, and it was kind of through a series of events that I kind of came to realize I didn't want to leave, go work on that movie out west. I didn't want to really enter into the film industry because it was a very difficult challenge to enter into. And so I ended up taking a job at my home parish as a youth minister part-time and teaching full-time at my old high school where my sister teaches. And I was there for 8 years and kind of going through the cycle and paying off my loans, which happened very quickly. But a lot of things happened in those 8 years. My sister had three more kids, one after the other, and those were big blessings because she had had breast cancer when she was 30, and the fact that she could have any children, let alone four back to back to back after that, was kind of a miracle. But again, this question of priesthood was always in the back of my mind, and it was really only in that last year of teaching that I started spiritual direction, went to a discernment retreat, and realized I needed to give this a shot. And here I've been for 6 years now in seminary. I mean, I finished a few weeks before ordination back in May. And interestingly enough, here's a little tidbit that's fun for people to know, is that one of my former students was in my same graduating class and ordination class. So
Really?
A man who's about 10 years younger than I am, Father Peter Jutras, was ordained with me. So he actually entered seminary a year before I did, but I ended up skipping a year. It's complicated, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And another one of the guys who was ordained with me, he wasn't in my youth group, but I knew him a little bit when he was in youth group because he was very actively involved in an adjacent parish. So it is amazing how all that comes together.
Yeah, and you kind of spent a lot of time in that little nook of Florida and Alabama. So I
Right.
would imagine you get to know a bunch of folks around there.
Oh, right. I mean, my family's lived there since I mean, before I was born, they lived in that area of Alabama, and then we moved to that area of Florida when I was very young. So yes, I'm very deeply rooted there and have a lot of connections. And at this point, have taught so many people that if you just kind of, they used to joke in the seminary that I was the mayor of Pensacola when we would go to different events because I just knew so many of the Catholics in the Catholic bubble. So, which again is kind of
Yeah.
one of the a different kind of circumstance, but that's kind of how we connected in Rome, which was still wild to me. You were someone I ran across multiple times, but there were so many people I met that had like one degree of separation, and a few other people that just we had other connections, and it was just kind of wild. And one of the highlights of my pilgrimage was just meeting people.
Well,
So
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. And how long were you there?
I was only in Rome for 5 full days. So
Nice. And
yeah,
you said it was kind of your honeymoon
yeah,
after
it
getting
was my
ordained?
exactly. I wanted to go do something for myself, go on a trip while I had the time, and it being the Jubilee, having a new pope, just so many different reasons. I had been to Rome for like 3 days, basically 10 years before that, but this time I just wanted to go and spend as much time exploring the city and doing things I didn't get to do that first trip because I got a lot done in that first trip, including seeing Pope Francis and so many other things. But it was like with the bus and everything. This time I was on my own, which has its downsides because I didn't always know what I was doing and where I should go or anything like that. But I got to check off Rome. I feel like I've gotten a good sense of the city of Rome at this point and the Vatican and everything.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I felt the same way after I got to spend 2 weeks there. So,
Right.
volunteering. But yeah, it was a great trip. And we're already wondering when we can get back to Italy because there's a lot we did not get
Yeah.
to see. So
Oh
that's
yeah. I've
awesome.
never seen any other part of Italy besides Rome. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. You need to get out and see some
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I wonder, like being a new campus minister, what surprises you most about ministering to college students?
Well, I think a couple of things is not only being a new campus minister, but also being a new priest. Like there's a lot of,
Sure.
you're talking about being a beginner, there's a lot of beginnings, like recreating yourself. And I feel like I've done that many times throughout my life. I think what surprises me the most is how I hadn't worked with college students before explicitly.
Mhm.
I'd worked with high schoolers a lot for the better part of 10 years. And I was in seminary for 6 years. And what I came to realize as I was a little nervous about this assignment, because like, why me? I have no experience working with college students whatsoever, is that I realized obviously I'd worked with high schoolers, and high schoolers are just college students that aren't there yet. And then I also worked with seminarians, most of whom were quite a lot younger than I am, and realizing, oh, wait, they're just recently graduated college students. So I guess how life-giving it is and how those skills in relating to young people transfer over just at a different age group, and it's not really anything intimidating, They obviously have different questions than high schoolers are facing because they're at a different point in their life and their lives where they're making even bigger choices than the choice of what to do after high school and struggling with things and being on their own for the first time and everything. So it's a different set of challenges, but it's not like a whole different realm like I was expecting it to be. I felt
Yeah.
myself really reflecting on the positive experiences I had in college, which is something I kind of experienced too as a high school teacher. I reflected back on high school and saw the good. And now it's just, I can't believe how life-giving it is in some ways. It's also draining because we have so many college students. It can be, we have two priests here. We have another priest in residence who helps out with some things, but I'm the one dedicated to the campus ministry. So it can be exhausting in that way
Mhm.
too, but
Yeah.
life-giving and exhausting, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. The college calendar maybe starts around 10 a.m., but it goes a little later in the day. And yeah, it's a lot. My sister teaches high school and she's been doing that for almost 30 years. So we always talk about that. Her seniors and my freshmen. And like you said, they're about the
Mm-hmm.
same age and different mentality. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities.
Right, right.
So, could you share a moment maybe where a student's openness or just willingness to talk with you kind of had an impact on you?
Yeah, it's not a specific moment that I can think of. I mean, there are a lot of specific moments, but I guess obviously being a new priest, it's like just the trust people have in priests is a very
Mm.
precious thing. And obviously that has been violated and can be violated. And that's kind of where the danger inherent in taking this role comes in. But the preciousness with which people are vulnerable to you is just a beautiful thing. It's also just who am I to hear these things, good or bad going on in people's lives? Like, who am I to give them advice about anything? And really, that comes out most clearly. And again, I can't obviously talk about specifics, but most clearly in confession, when the students are so open about what's going on in their lives. And obviously, that experience is different every single time. But coming in from the outside, until a few months ago, I had never heard anyone's confessions besides my own. I'd never been present for any of them. And so just the variety you get and talking to different people, and sometimes there's different trends and things you get a sense of. But you just realize how delicate really that space is that you're working with someone in their most vulnerable moments and everything. And so just the openness that young people have, and really like sometimes when they're kind of confessing, I use that as an examination of my own conscience. And I'm like, oh wow, you realize how fallen you are and how much you need the Lord's mercy, and kind of can be convicting in a different way that I wasn't expecting. Yeah, I definitely think confession is the one area where I really have experienced that openness really impacting me deeply. And just the fact again that this is a precious moment and I am the witness, I am the means of this sacrament, but it's not about me forgiving their sins. It's about their relationship with Christ, with the Lord, and trying to honor that and be there present, but also have a healthy detachment from what's going on, because their burdens that they're laying down aren't my burdens to carry. They're the Lord's burdens to carry. I think that would be that's definitely
Yeah.
the thing. You just until you do it, you don't really understand it. I'm sure in counseling and things like that, people have very similar things. And of course, I've walked with people in different ways, but this is like a different level of vulnerability.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's actually something I've never heard a priest express. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's very beautiful. So, what would you say are maybe some of the biggest spiritual obstacles that students face on campus?
That's interesting. I've talked to the director of the campus ministry. His name is Sam Nunnally. He's a recent convert, and he's been running our program for a couple of years. And to him, one of the key insights he's pointed out is that young people don't feel like they're loved a lot of
Hmm.
times. And of course, we have a culture that in many ways is very comfortable. I mean, I'm a result of this culture as much as anybody. And despite having so many creature comforts, having so many things at our disposal, we're often spiritually poor. And that's something that Mother Teresa pointed out. And obviously, she's been deceased for almost 30 years now. But just that in America, despite this great economic wealth, that there's this spiritual poverty. And so I think just emphasizing how much they are loved and the Lord loves them. It's something that came to my mind reflecting on that point was just looking at the cross. And this came up, we had the exaltation of the Holy Cross earlier this year. And it was right in the midst of a lot of kind of darkness happening in the society and everything. And just realizing if you look at the cross and you only see it as an instrument by which you feel guilty, you kind of turn inward on yourself and you don't recognize that it's an instrument of love. Yes, it's the Lord taking on our sins and the things that we personally do. But at the same time, it's not something he does unwillingly. It's something he shoulders for us, for our good and for our love. And so, as much as I recognize that many students don't appreciate the depth of that, I also recognize I don't always appreciate the depths of that. And yeah, any feelings of shame or prolonged guilt that doesn't seem to be healed by the sacraments, that's where I really think there's a big obstacle. That's kind of on one side. On the other side, you kind of have, and I think honestly, most people who are practicing their faith in some ways kind of struggle with that, like appreciating on a deeper level that love and almost like scrupulosity and things like that. And I can never do anything right. And just being very harsh on themselves. At the same time, obviously, I'm reaching specifically students who are coming to our campus ministry and everything who have some sort of desire. We have missionaries from Focus on campus who are very actively engaging all sorts of people. Now we have students who are doing the same thing. That's not as much my arena. Of course, people come in all the time, but you also have the opposite extreme in our culture, which is obviously on campus as well. And that's kind of like this relativity or more relativism and permissiveness where anything goes, that nothing I do matters. And so really, I think either one of those extremes is something that we all kind of struggle with because of society and because of the cultural milieu and all that kind of stuff. But either appreciating how much God loves us and then that our faith is about God's love. And that's central message of our faith. That's the good news. We call it good news for a reason. It's not bad news. It's not guilt news, it's not shame news, it's good news. But at the same time, recognizing that so many of us really, and again, we're all fallen, we're all sinners. So I'm saying this as much to myself, but needing to kind of have that check of, am I doing what's right? Am I doing the things that are good for me? Am I trying to follow the Lord and not falling into like a permissiveness? Oh, anything goes, everything's fine, which is obviously very rampant in society today.
Very rampant. And it's really disorienting because if everything's okay, then what's not,
Right, right,
there's no boundaries. There's nothing to
right.
kind of ground you. And yeah, I see that too on my end. And I teach a lot of secular students that wouldn't
Yeah.
claim to have any kind of religious background or faith or orientation at all. And I've really seen it drop in the last few years. Even the 5 years I've been working at the University of Central Florida, I've noticed a dip in the number of people who are saying they have any kind of faith,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty concerning in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Another question I have for you is, what role does beauty in the liturgy, arts, or nature play in evangelization efforts?
I think, again, being a little bit older too, I recognize the kind of generational gap, even from the
Mm,
20 years almost since I was out of college. And even in the seminary, just noticing this gap, just cultural gap between generations. Because I've obviously had an iPhone for a long time, like a smartphone for a long time, but a lot of our students have had access to a smartphone their entire lives. But it's a whole different reality. I remember using the internet for the first time as a young teenager, and it was dial-up. It was a very different kind of reality. And so I think there's a massive craving in our society, especially among young people, for beauty. And it's something I haven't explored deeply, but so many of my classmates at seminary were attracted to the liturgy because of the beauty of the liturgy, because of the words, because of the prayers, because of the music, even the bells and whistles and the incense and things like that. And I know our masses are overflowing here at the Co-Cathedral, and it's a
mm,
beautiful thing. We have standing room only oftentimes. We even,
beautiful.
before I got here, they added a second evening mass at 8 p.m. And last Sunday, we had that mass. The pastor celebrated it, but we did a candlelit mass where we dimmed all the lights. We had our incense, which we usually often use for the big masses, and had several candles around the altar. And it was just like, it creates this different atmosphere. But so many people I talked to after mass, and I didn't say the mass, but I was visiting with people here and there, or before mass too, we're drawn to that because they're looking for something beyond themselves. They're looking to be rooted in something, connected in something permanent. That's, I guess, where the overwhelming part comes in, is like the one priest who's administering, and Father Tim, our rector, is very involved too, but it can be a little overwhelming because there's so much desire right now for deeper beauty, for the sacraments, for meaning, connection, and all of that, despite the kind of relativistic tendencies in society. There's like this deep craving among young people, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful, but it's also like, oh wow, we have a lot of work to do, because there's a great desire and great need.
A lot of people to minister to.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, and it's funny you say, like, talk about the beauty in nature too. And I know this is something true for me, is that sometimes we become so focused on whatever we got right in front of us that we just don't look outside. And Tallahassee is a pretty beautiful place with a lot of parks and outdoor spaces and trees and things like that. And it's just, yeah, just getting out and going for a walk sometimes. I'll give that advice to a college student, like, just go outside. Don't spend all your time on the internet, on your phone, in your room. There's a lot to explore out there. So. And I obviously studied,
100%.
yeah, I studied film, so I have an appreciation for art. I'm not by any means either a film expert or an art expert, but obviously all of those things can communicate beauty. And about 3 or 4 years ago, this is while I was in seminary, but I was here because it's our co-cathedral off and on. They actually renovated our sanctuary. And it was fine before. It was very plain with a wooden backdrop. And there was actually an arson where somebody burned the bishop's chair, but it was an excuse to like, let's do something different. And so they've since beautified our sanctuary with these beautiful pieces of art, these paintings of the saints, of the Florida martyrs, of our patrons, of the Holy Family, with the beautiful crucifix. I know in our city that really draws a lot of people, is just the beauty of the sanctuary alone. And I literally did nothing to make that happen.
Right, right. Oh, I'm originally from the Chicago area, and we have many beautiful churches
Right,
in Chicago, very traditional, 150 years old.
right.
And moving to Central Florida, all of the parish churches are 50 years,
Right.
60 years old.
Right. Right.
So very different design, very modern. We've got the TV screens up and all of that. And
Right.
it's taken some getting used to. And there's a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
places we can go to where like, okay, this feels a little bit more like what we're used to. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
It is a
yeah,
different world. Yeah.
yeah, the environment is huge. It makes a big impact on folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I love that. And I agree too. The college campuses are beautiful places.
They
You know,
are.
there are many, like, at our campus here in UCF, we have a arboretum. It's really lovely with all the plants and nature and all of that. And we have beautiful fountains on campus and just places that can inspire you if you just stop and experience them.
Right. Right.
And the churches and cathedrals and all of that is really helpful too. So I'm glad you have
Yeah.
that beautiful place on campus.
Yeah, it's kind of idyllic. We're right on the hill, right across from campus, and there's these huge oak trees and everything. And my college, we had an avenue of oak trees, and it was just a beautiful campus that was very old. So
Yeah,
colleges can be very beautiful, like you said.
yeah, yeah. Well, if you could tell every Catholic college student one thing, what would it be?
I think it would be to be patient. And this is a piece of advice I use a lot. And then I talk to a lot of young people who have had some sort of big conversion where either they were raised Catholic, but they were kind of lukewarm in their faith until something happened, some experience, or they had no faith or a different faith and they're coming to Catholicism and they're just like on fire and burning with this passion and this love for the Lord and everything. And I would just say be patient. And the metaphor I
Mhm.
use, and this is good for beginners too. There's the reason we call new Catholics, newly baptized people neophytes, that there is this kind of beginning element. But is that St. Paul, of all people, had this massive conversion, like 180 degrees conversion about
Mhm.
who Christ is and what his purpose is. Now, what carries on between his conversion and post conversion is his personality, his gifts, and those kinds of things. But the direction of his passion completely shifts. But if you
Mhm.
read Galatians, where he kind of talks about his conversion in his own words, we have Acts of the Apostles where you get the sense of that there, but this is in his own words that he didn't immediately go from being a persecutor of the church to being the church's greatest apostle, the apostle of the Gentiles. He, in his own words, takes a few years, goes to the desert, and only after a period of time in the desert and kind of by himself does he go to the apostles and kind of start integrating his life in that way. Because it's such a big shift. And I think sometimes people, and I know this happens to me too, you just want your entire life to change immediately. And sometimes you've given your heart over, you've had this conversion, but like the day-to-day kind of things, your body almost has to catch up with where your heart is.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for that, but just be patient. Like you can't, again, talking to some students, it's like, I just had this big conversion and they want to be Saint John of the Cross or Saint Teresa of Avila immediately. And it's like, if that's what you're striving for, that's what the Lord wants, then great, it will happen. But it's not going to happen overnight. Because even St. Paul, like the biggest example of conversion, I would say, and that we have, it took time to integrate all of this. And it's not even clear after he went and saw the apostles that immediately he was like founding churches and things like that. So yeah, just be patient with yourselves. And when you do fall, when you do make mistakes, like just be patient with yourself. And I do wish I had been more patient myself when I was young. I always kind of
Mm.
considered seminary and priesthood and everything. And looking back, I'm not sure I wish I had entered at a different time because you can't really think about those things, but I just wish I could have gone back and said, just be patient with yourself. Don't live out of angst about what's going to happen. What's going to happen if I do this? Spent so many years worrying and all of that stuff, and it's just not very fruitful. Just be patient would kind of be the big thing. It's hard to hear that because of that kind of desire and drive that people have, but to me, that would be a very helpful thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of great scripture verses about why do you have so much anxiety?
Right, right,
Like that was very common then, probably like it is today, and
right,
just kind of human nature. So definitely it's good advice because that patience is going to help get you through those moments where maybe your anxiety is rising and that sort of
right, right,
thing.
right.
So yeah, yeah, great advice. Well, I have one more question for you before we go to our lightning round. How can listeners support campus ministry, either spiritually or practically?
Well, I'm going to echo the words that I just gave, and that is to be patient, first off.
Mhm.
So, oftentimes, and I understand this, I mean, I worked with young people for a long time, and you need to hold everyone to a high standard. You need to hold young people to a high standard. They're capable of those things. but you also need to be patient with them because certain
Mhm.
things, like, for example, you might have a college student coming to the mass for the first time or the first time in a very long time, and they might not know what to do. They might not be dressed as appropriately as they should be, and things like that. So instead of like approaching them with this kind of suspicion, approach them with like, it's a good thing that they're here. Like make that the default. Be patient with wherever they are. Doesn't mean don't hold them accountable for their actions. That's not what I mean. But if your default disposition is one of, oh, thank God you're here versus, oh, you're here, it shifts your perspective a lot. And I'll also say, I mean, prayers are obviously very important. And so many of our college students need prayers. I would say, again, patience with them and realizing that either because society is different, we don't know how people were raised. I mean, some of the cultural norms of the past haven't been passed down very well. And so sometimes college students aren't where we expect them to be, for good or bad. And sometimes it's amazing ways that they're like so far advanced of where I was at their age. So many times, especially when I see a huge crew at the 7 a.m. mass. But yeah, so be patient, pray for them. And also, I know this is probably the case at UCF, a lot of different places. Campus ministry is very expensive. So I would say if you want to donate to some place that will definitely be used for the good of souls, college students, college campuses are the place to be. Like I said, we have focus missionaries here. There are different kinds of organizations that support young people at this crucial moment in their lives, get involved. And it doesn't all happen at college age. A lot of the statistics say that a lot of young people leave the faith, even if they're like practicing when they're a lot younger, when they're like in middle school. So get involved, pray for them, be patient. I was a youth minister. We need volunteers. Campus ministry, not as much, but it's not just up to the priest to make these things happen. It's up to all of us as a church. The church isn't just the hierarchy, it's the entire body of Christ. And these young people are part of that body of Christ. So we can hold them accountable, keep them engaged, but at the same time, do whatever we can because it's about passing on the faith. And that's what the root word of catechism and catechetical is echoes. So these things echo down generation to generation. So
Yeah.
kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of my
No, I love it. I love it. I really appreciate everything you said there. And I do agree. It can be jarring when you go from your home parish. Maybe you've gone your whole life, if you've gone to mass there and
right.
participated in things, and you come someplace else and it's very different.
Hmm.
And just adjusting to the new culture and the new way of doing things. And maybe it's a little different. Just the vibe is different.
Hmm.
Just recognize that that's just another piece of this bigger puzzle, because one of the things I love about our faith is that you can go to a Catholic church anywhere in the world,
Right. Right.
and it will be a little different, and you might be a little nervous walking in and all of that, but it's still our faith.
Right.
It's very special, and a lot of
Oh
folks
yeah.
can't do that,
Yeah. No,
so
they can't. Yeah.
yeah, they got their home church here in Central Florida, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah. So here's some quick questions for you. Who is your favorite saint and why?
Saint Therese of Lisieux is my favorite saint. She is the patroness of my home parish. So where I went to school from kindergarten through eighth grade, where I served as a youth minister for 8 years, where my family still goes, where my dad was buried, where my sister got married, where I received a lot of the sacraments. And actually, our focus missionaries gave me this
Oh,
painting or this picture of her that has some flowers that one of them picked up from Lisieux, from the garden there. So anyway, she's right there on my desk.
beautiful.
So yeah, definitely. She's not
That's
my only
awesome.
favorite saint, but she's definitely my favorite saint. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. What's one piece of advice that you would have for new college students?
I feel like I gave that already, but again, I kind of be patient, but at the same time, college is a great time to broaden your horizons. And obviously, that can be a bad thing if you're engaging in behavior you shouldn't be engaging in and everything. But I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be true to who you are. Don't be afraid to be true to what you believe. But also don't be afraid to put yourself out there in different ways and connect with people and form friendships and be open to where the Lord is asking you to be and calling you to be. Yeah, that was John Paul II's great line is be not afraid. And I think it just echoes down still.
Yeah. Yeah, we needed to hear it now as much as we did then, so for
Yeah.
sure. And lastly, what's one piece of advice for any parents or family members of college students?
I've already said be patient, so I won't say that one. But because obviously I don't have the experience of being a biological father and raising a child. And then I've been around my sister's kids a lot. It's a little different. They're a little bit younger than that too. But I would say you've got to allow your children to make mistakes. And that doesn't mean you encourage them to make serious mistakes with their lives because obviously there's a lot of things at stake, especially in college age when you have this independence and everything. But at the same time, if they do make mistakes, you've got to be willing to forgive them, to work with them, to hold them accountable. Again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but at some point, to a certain degree, you have to cut the apron strings and let them fly or not, and help support them in any way that you can. But don't be afraid of the potential of making mistakes, because it's really only in learning from others' mistakes or learning from our own mistakes primarily that we grow. So again, there's a whole range of what I can mean by mistake there, but and I guess maybe not giving undue pressure to study a certain field or a certain thing or go to a certain college. I remember when I was teaching high school, there just was a lot of pressure on some of my students about what they were going to study and everything. And it just, but help them make good choices, encourage them to make good choices, but also they have to make their own choices, you know?
Yes, I very much agree with that. We'll talk with students on my end about classes they do or don't want to take or what major they're involved in. And sometimes they express that parents are really pushing them in one direction or another, and they'd
Right,
much rather be doing something else, which,
right,
ultimately one day maybe they will get to do that, but they feel the pressure not to disappoint their parents.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Father
Of course.
Chris. We really
Yeah.
enjoyed having you. And any final closing words you want to add
No,
before
thank you.
we
This is,
end?
yeah, like I said, it was a beautiful thing running into you and your husband like 2 or 3 times, maybe 3 or 4 times, the
Yeah.
different holy doors and different sites and everything. And kind of traveling on my own, it was a kind of a beautiful thing, like I said, to even make connection. Oh, Father George Nursey. I know Father George Nursey. And the Catholic world, as big as it is, and definitely experienced that with a number of pilgrims and everything. Just it got much smaller when you realize there's a lot of connection there.
Yes. And I can't wait to go back. So maybe we'll see you there again one
Yeah.
day. I don't know.
Yeah. Of
But yeah, well, thank you again. I've really
course.
appreciated it. And I just want to say to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode of Catholics on Campus, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your friends. I appreciate your help in spreading the word about this podcast. So until next time, Mary, untie her of knots, pray for us. God bless you.